we don't get John, I'm just having a quick look around the screen. I think we are quorum? I think we would be, if we needed to be.
I'll give John a quick call, just see.
Thanks. Okay.
Can I just say, was it this document that's got the photograph of Neil and Matthew on? How are you, lads? That's the sort of thing that would be discredited if it was like on a dating site or anything. You know that.
What do you mean? What you trying to say?
Well, that you're about 25 years younger.
You both look 12-year-olds.
Well, you can always dream, can't you? That's what this bloody job's done to her, you see?
Less than 10 years old, those photos.
I know. You see, I tell you, it's taking years off me, this job.
Right, okay, John's here. So
apologies for being late, Matthew.
Only Pat that we'll be waiting for. We're 2 minutes past. Shall we start anyway? Oh. Right, yeah, we'll give it 30 seconds then, Lee. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this extraordinary governing body meeting for NHS South Tyneside CCG. I'll remind everybody we are meeting in public once again over the web streaming channel that we use. This is a meeting to receive the annual accounts, annual report, and various statutory audits that need to be put in place around that. We do have apologies for absence from Matt Brown, from Deb Cornell, and from Louise Lydon, who would normally be with us. Having scheduled a meeting like this in school half-term holidays, it's understandable to get a few absences. There would normally be a few other people as well who aren't yet on the call, so we're just waiting to see if we might get one or two others joining us as we go, or equally things may have come up for others that we're not aware of. Can I ask all present if they have any declarations of interest that must be made? I'll note the usual declarations of a number of us, so myself, Neil, John, and Tarquin, and also Pat, who's just joined with other roles within the NHS, as per our usual standing declarations that will be made. Has anybody else got any other declarations of interest that they need to add to today? No, I couldn't see when we reviewed things what others might be added. Okay, so we don't have minutes of previous meetings to go through, this being an extraordinary meeting, so we'll crack straight on with the annual accounts, and Kate.
Thank you, Matthew. So these were the annual accounts that were presented to the Audit and Risk Committee a week or so ago. There have been no changes since that time. So at the last governing body, you'll recall I asked that we have delegated authority to make any changes to those accounts presentation that were needed. There have been none. So these are the same accounts that went to the Audit and Risk Committee for a page-by-page turn through last week. I wasn't proposing to go through them page by page unless people were particularly interested in me doing so. So I should pause there for any signs of interest. No? Okay, so as I say, these are the same accounts. So subject to the appropriate audit reports and recommendation from John from the Audit and Risk Committee, they are here for submission for agreement for submission up to NHS England Improvement. Thank you.
Okay, John, from an audit committee perspective, anything to add there particularly?
No. Experienced team putting these together. No problems from the auditors noted at the last issue. There was a couple of I think we were awaiting a final document from the external auditors on value for money, but that will come later. But in terms of just endorse what Kate said, we had delegated authority. We went through them. It's been a good process, and they're a fair reflection of the of where we are.
Okay, thanks very much. Now I'm just trying to see, is there a covering paper with the ask on it as to what? Or just to
no, there's no covering paper. Sorry, Matthew. It's literally just these are the annual accounts for as I say, recommendation to submit to NHS.
Okay, well, we'll receive them. Note the audit committee's detailed scrutiny of the accounts, and therefore agree that they are a record that needs to be submitted to NHS if that's what's required from your point of view statutorily, Kate. Good. Okay, nods all around, so I think that's agreed. Right. Moving on, the next item on the agenda then is the annual report and the annual governance statement, and this is Neil.
Yep. So once again, Matthew, I don't intend to go through this page by page. There's many pages there. It's been through our committees a number of times and commented on. It's a good read. It makes a good read. It's a good look back over a very difficult year. And I think the CCG has performed very well, while still maintaining some work in other areas that have not been directly COVID related. So it is here for final governing body sign off. And happy to take any questions or comments from it, really.
Thank you, colleagues. Comments and questions. I mean, my comment is that it's always the same at this time of year. Gosh, we have done a lot, haven't we? And even more so this year with all of the COVID response that's been going on, and everything that we've managed to keep on doing whilst responding to COVID throughout this year is very impressive. And I think the whole team need to be congratulated by the governing body for the work that's gone in to all of these activities throughout the year, and also to the production of the report as well. So I'm sure that Neil and Kate will ensure that the governing body's congratulations and an acknowledgement of all of that hard work are passed on. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. We've played this out and we've talked about the annual report in previous meetings, but it's probably just worth saying at 204 pages, it is very, very long. And I know you're restricted in terms of NHS England asking to cover so many criterias. What I particularly like about it is how your money's spent in South Tyneside, the visual. I think that's really powerful. If South Tyneside was a village of 1,000 people, this is what it equates to. And I think what I'm getting at, it would be great in the future to have a lighter read, with more visuals in as we go forward, and I'm sure that's probably going to be in hand somewhere.
Yeah, we have talked in previous years about putting together a system annual report, haven't we? Rather than a CCG annual report, and very much more of what's been done this year has been done as a system. So it is reading, I think, more as a system report, although it's not quite that at the moment. Kate?
Yeah, it was just to come back on Paul's comment that we do every year produce sort of an abridged version of this document, because we recognise it's not particularly public friendly at the moment, is it? So there is an abridged version, and Matthew's absolutely right. We were talking about having a report that sort of was more of a system one. I don't think we're quite there yet, but yeah, that would be an aspiration, definitely.
Is the shorter version, or the easy access version, whatever you might want to call it, in production already? How far along is that version? Is the scope to make it more of a system easy access report this year, given it's one of the non-statutory documents potentially that we have to
Yeah, I would say potentially, but can I pass that one to Lisa, because Lisa's been instrumental in pulling together the annual report.
Yes, just to say that we normally start the summary annual report once the annual report's been signed off. We can also look at doing other things to share the annual report. We're developing an animation for social media, just to direct people to where the information is. You know, there is other things that we can do. An easy read version, for example, but as you know, it's a lot of complex information, so there's only so much we can do to summarise all of that. But the summary document will be produced once the annual report has been finalised.
So am I hearing there then, Lisa, that there is scope for that to become more of a system summary report, potentially?
Well, I'll link to find out how you want that to be developed. We normally it just includes some key information, try to make it really accessible, visual, lots of pictures, and just keep it more accessible to wider members of the public. There's also scope to update anyone's pictures in there if anyone wants. There's still time.
No comment. Happy with mine from 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's fine. So, colleagues, are we content to do what is being asked of us in the covering paper, which is, well, I find it and read it. Where has it gone? Approve the annual report. Note that the accountable officer is required to sign and date the report and agree for it to be submitted to NHS England by the deadline. Good. Lots of nods around the table. So that's fantastic. Just a thought, really, from me. This will be our second to last annual report, assuming that the legislation that's being suggested goes through and is passed. I suppose our final annual report will be one of the final things that CCG will do in the next year or so. Is there scope for a sort of a bit more of a reflective report on the whole of the lifetime of the CCG when we get round to that? Because actually I think that it will be potentially a useful document for archives and for those that we hand on the baton to and so on, for us to reflect on what we've done over the lifetime of the CCG. Is that something that we've given any thought and consideration to? Jeanette?
I'm not sure that we have given consideration yet, but I think it's an excellent idea and I think it's something that we should do.
Lisa?
Just to say, when we start the annual report, we do get a template that we have to follow, so certain headings in a particular order. So, you know, we do have to follow that, but there is scope to put your own personal stamp on it as well.
Neil?
I think Paul was before me, Matthew.
Great. Go on,
Yeah.
Paul.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, just really reflect on what Jeanette said. Maybe it's an opportunity to look at legacy. You know, in the lifetime of the CCG, the things we've done really well, and the things that you'd like to see continued and perhaps develop even further. So whether that could be combined into an annual report or not, or it's a separate document, I'm not too sure. But it's something we could be looking to work on.
Neil.
Yeah. Paul said what I was going to say. A legacy document, I think, if it can't fit nicely within the annual report, would be a good idea. Definitely, I think it'll probably be a requirement, actually, to be honest. But yeah, a good idea.
I'm sure that a very long and detailed legacy report will be a requirement, but actually. Something that's perhaps a bit more accessible as well at that point would be something to do, because what we won't be in a position to do is produce and sign off a legacy document and then, as we are doing this time, in subsequent months produce a shortened version of it. So the two will have to be done, I think, in parallel going forwards, if that's what we aspire to. Lots of nods, so we shall look to doing that in the future. Right, I'll move us on, having taken that slight detour, to the next item in a moment. We are rattling through these this agenda very quickly, so I wonder, Kate, whether you've got any option to get in touch with Cameron, who's due to join us for item 2021-31, just to maybe let him know that we might need to have him a little bit sooner than planned. So if you do need to dip out to do that, we'll understand that. The next item then on the agenda is the management letter of representation, and that's Neil once again.
Yep. So the purpose of this is, again, as part of our annual process, is to provide governing body with a copy of the letter that I send to our auditors, basically just saying that yes, we've incorporated true and factual details when we have submitted information on our accounts and to audit, that I'm not aware of any kind of omissions or any fraudulent practice within the CCG, and also that that, which is slightly amusing, and that the CCG is a viable ongoing concern. Now, obviously, this this relates to last year. That we've got the new legislation coming in, so it seems a bit odd to say that yes, we're a viable going concern when the likelihood is that we'll be gone it will be transitioned into the ICS as of the end of March. But as I say, it is an opinion based on last year's and currently where we're at. It's here for information and comment, and it's a declaration from myself to say that the information provided is true and factual.
Thank you. It's a letter that needs to be sent every year. So, colleagues, any comments or questions around that? No. I'm sure we'll consider the content to be appropriate and note that letter is being sent. That's great. Thanks very much, Neil. Next item is the Internal Audit Annual Report. Head of Internal Audit Opinion. I think, Gillian, I notice your camera has just come on. Perfectly timed in order to hand over to you for that item. So over to you, Gillian.
Thank you. Our annual report provides you with overall assurance on the system of internal control and also assurance on the adequacy of the internal audit services performance. So the report reflects on the impact of the COVID pandemic on the audit plan and the resulting changes to the core assurance audits, but it also confirms that sufficient audits were undertaken to allow us to provide an overall head of internal audit opinion. So our overall opinion remains at substantial assurance, and the report sets out the rationale for this. So we've issued 5 final and 2 draft reports, 6 of which have an individual assurance level of substantial. So 1 draft report on the hospital discharge scheme has a reasonable assurance level, but issues reported are not significant enough to impact upon the overall audit opinion, given the exceptional circumstances being worked in and the fact that the scheme is non-recurrent. So in addition, we've issued a report on data security and protection toolkit, which is at an interim stage, and the outcome reflects that more work needs to be done before the toolkit submission date of the 30th of June. So we provided an update in the annual report, but it doesn't impact on the overall opinion provided for 2021. So the report also captures our performance against agreed KPIs and quality measures. There's been a delayed workflow with remote working, but nothing of concern has been identified around the delivery of work or the client feedback we've received through post-audit questionnaires. That's all I'd like to highlight from the report, but I'd be happy to take any queries.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Colleagues, queries for Gillian, comments? Kate?
Thank you. So it was just to flag really that DSP toolkit audit is not unique to South Tyneside CCG. It affects a number of CCGs across the patch who deal with NICs. It has been a little bit of a frustration actually for the CFOs, but there is work ongoing with Deb Cornell's linking in with the team at Audit One and also with NICs in terms of resolving the issues that have been flagged. That's
good to know. Screen's just changing. Any other further comments and questions for Gillian? John, I usually bring you specifically at this point as leader of the relevant committee, but Pat, your hand's gone up as well.
Thanks, Chair. It was really to say that we have seen this at the Audit Committee, and hence we've asked all of the questions at that committee and received all of the responses that we required. So it's not that we have no queries; it's that we've actually already asked them.
John,
Pat said it.
Yeah, and the minutes of those committees do come, as I'm sure other governing body members who aren't members of the audit committee are well aware, for us to review. So we've been aware of what's been going throughout the year around this virtual table, so to speak. So it doesn't look like anybody else is going to ask you any difficult questions then, Gillian. So we will note the content of the report as required, and the substantial work that goes on at the audit committee, and thank the audit committee members and the internal audit team for all their work throughout the year afterwards. Thanks very much, Gillian, for presenting.
Thank you.
Right. Well, the next item on the agenda would be the external audit report. Now, Cameron was, as we said, due to come to present this quite substantially later than we are now in this meeting. So we're left without Cameron and a long bit of meeting time to fill. Can I suggest that we perhaps suspend the formal part of the meeting and close the formal in public part of the meeting at this point? So we'll cease the streaming and then we'll recommence the meeting when we have Cameron, but those of us within the meeting could perhaps use it for some informal discussion on other matters whilst we wait for Cameron to arrive. So Lee, if you could do that and cease the streaming. Those watching, we will recommence. We will aim to be recommencing by the latest at 11:15. We may recommence earlier if we do get Cameron Waddell attending. So thanks very much. I do think some thoughts to come back, everybody. The masses watching us online, I'm sure. We're now up to the point where we take the report from our external auditors. So I'm pleased to now welcome Cameron Waddell from Mazars for the external audit completion report item for the year. I'll hand over to you, Cameron.
Thanks, Chair. I'll go through it in enough detail, hopefully for the governing body, but if people have got questions, please ask as I go through. I'll stop at the end of the section that deals with the accounts for questions, if that's okay, Chair, and then deal with VFM separate, because VFM is a key change in terms of the scope of the audit for this year. So in terms of the audit of the accounts, we are broadly complete that work. I say broadly complete because there's always a few things we still need to do after today's governing body meeting. And I think, Chair, while it's not the most exciting topic, the ledger is shut at the moment for all NHS CCGs in England and won't reopen until the 10th of June. So we have to hold off until the 10th of June to issue the signed report. But we're not really anticipating any issues between now and then on the basis of the work that's complete. There's very little left to do. In line with that, we are proposing an unqualified opinion on the accounts, which I would hope is good news, Chair. We have nothing to report in relation to the governance statement, nor do we have anything specific to report around about a remuneration report, the word I still can't say properly. The one that's got the senior officer salaries in it and the members' information as well. On regularity, we have audited the expenditure of the CCG. We've not identified anything that would be out with the CCG's powers, nor have we identified any non-compliance with the targets that are set for the CCG in terms of the constitution. So things like not making sure you don't spend more than your allocation, etc., which is around about the final note in the actual accounts themselves. Once the ledger's open again, we will be able to issue the audit report on the accounts, a separate report on the consistency schedules that you have to submit, and we'll also report to the National Audit Office as well, so they can take that into account in their overall audit of NHS England. In terms of status of the audit, you'll notice there's bits and pieces there, but you have to remember, Chair, that we issued this report probably well over a week ago. It's probably about 10 days ago now. So broadly speaking, the Abel's work is complete with nothing significant to report. Cut-off testing, we have nearly finished that work, but worth just pointing out the reason for that, Chair, is we test up to the 31st of May, which is obviously Monday. So obviously that needs to be the sample up to that point in time. So we're not anticipating issues with that testing either. Disclosures, we are broadly complete. Consolidation schedules, we will only complete that work once the ledger is open on the 10th of June, but it doesn't take very long to do that for the CCG. And then obviously we have to complete the review and closure process, but we're not anticipating any issues. And you'll see from that page of the report, those circles are green, which sort of supports that view. I'm not going to spend too much about the audit approach, Chair, but just to highlight the fact that while we don't rely on the service auditor reports, we do look at them from a risk point of view and look at the control environment. Slightly unusually this year, but perhaps not surprising given the pandemic impact. They're all qualified. We feel the CCG and our NECs have got appropriate mitigating controls in place. And we have actually carried out a substantive testing approach to get that assurance regardless of controls. But still an important point, I think, just to note. And worth noting, Chair, that service audit reports, they're either on or off. So if there's an exception, it's qualified. If there are no exceptions, it's unqualified. But it just takes the one exception to qualify it, regardless of what that exception is and whether it applies to an individual CCG or not. So worth bearing that in mind. In terms of significant findings, you'll see from management override of controls, risk, nothing significant to report. And in terms of prescribing expenditure, we're aware that there was a small difference between the estimate that CCG had to put in its accounts in April and the information that's provided to CCG in late May around about actual expenditure. But immaterial difference, so therefore no need to amend the accounts unless Kate chooses to do so. And I'm guessing Kate's going to choose not to do so, which is fine. Just quickly on the other qualitative aspects, we've asked for a few amendments to be made. There's a few areas where the CCG doesn't fully comply with the GAM. Neither do any of the other CCGs, the irony being because the template the CCG sent to fill in doesn't comply fully with the GAM, which is not lost on us as auditors. So we highlight those. Essentially, you're actually providing more information than you need in some instances. So more is better than less in that regard. We have also asked just for little tweaks to the wording about going concern. I think I probably delved into the meeting just as you were talking about what's going to be happening over the next 9 months to the end of March 22. We feel that's important in terms of just highlighting that fact, and the fact remains that services will continue to be provided regardless. Significant matters, you're probably unsurprised we spent a bit of time talking to Kate and the team around about the impact of coronavirus on the financial performance of the CCG. Again, we talked about the revised financial regime. We've talked about ICS, ICP impact and other areas around service auditor reports, prescribing, etc. So the areas that we've focused our attention on in the audit. We've had no difficulties at all. My preference and the team's preference is still to spend a bit of time on site and a bit of time remote, but we've done the audit remotely as we did last year again. Hopefully next year will be somewhat different because we learned it's a bit more efficient being able to nip along to Kate's office or Adele's, speak to Adele, rather than sort of set up meetings, etc. But notwithstanding that, and we think it's gone very smoothly. So we'd like to thank Kate and her team. and also the next people as well that have been involved in the audit, because it's gone pretty smoothly, all things considered. Internal control recommendations, you'll see nothing to raise, which is good. And the statements are mainly to do with disclosure amendments. You might ask, Chair, why it is that we say there's no unadjusted misstatements when I've mentioned the prescribing figure is slightly different. The reason is because the difference is below our triviality threshold, and so we've not reported that really because it's trivial, essentially. I'll stop there, Chair, because that's me basically covered the accounts bit of the audit, just in case anybody's got any questions for me.
The audit is a two-way process, so we hear from you, but you also need to hear from us about concerns. So this is the opportunity for all members of the governing body to raise any questions and concerns with yourself, Cameron. Does anybody have anything that they wish to raise at this point? No. Okay.
Well, I have to say that's a relief, Chair.
Oh, Kate's got a hand in mind.
Thank you. No, it was just really to sort of say that actually we had a new audit manager in place this year, which could have been very difficult considering we're working remotely and all that sort of thing, but it's been really smooth. So I suppose I would echo the thanks back to Mazars to say actually it could have been more tricky than it was. It was very easy. So thank you.
I'll thank Diane for that, Kate. Thank you. So in terms of value for money, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on it, Chair, because we've done a presentation earlier in the year around about the changes to the code. But the changes to the code have had an impact in terms of timescales. So Diane and I, so the audit manager and I, we feel we have enough work completed at this point in time to be confident that there are no significant weaknesses in the CCG's arrangements, and therefore we do not need to make a significant recommendation in the audit report. However, recognising the impact of the pandemic and the fact that the NEO issued some of the guidance slightly later than we all would have liked, they have granted an extension of a couple of months effectively for auditors to complete the commentary. So if you remember, Chair, we issued the audit report on the accounts, etc., signed, but we also now have to issue a separate commentary on VFM arrangements. So we are drafting that commentary just now. But to make sure that tone and content are accurate, we will be issuing that a little bit later than the signed audit report, which is perfectly okay. But we're anticipating mid-July, the absolute latest, to finalise that. And given the context of the next 9 months, we think getting that commentary right and appropriate in terms of tone and content is very important this year. I wasn't going to say much more than that, Chair, beyond the letter of representation is contained in Appendix A. It is almost identical to last year, as you'd probably expect. The only slight tweak to it is around about going concern, and that again relates to what's proposed in 9 months' time. The draft report, audit report's not there because when we issued this report, we didn't actually have the template ready because of the ongoing debate about value for money reporting. But it is unmodified in all respects, and we will send that through to Kate ASAP. But it's pretty uncontroversial in terms of wording, as you would expect, based on the findings from the audit. And then finally, Chair, we just need to highlight what could be seen as perceived threats to independence, because we are actually the appointed auditor, NHS SBS. It's an entirely separate statutory audit delivered by an entirely separate team. So while we don't think there are any actual threats to independence, we do nevertheless highlight some safeguards that are in place to reassure the CCG. We also issue the Capita Service Audit Report. I think I've mentioned already, we don't rely on that. We look at it from a point of view of risk. But again, there could be a potential threat. So again, we highlight the key independence safeguards that are put in place, which are fundamentally an entirely separate team. And the fees involved in that, when you split that across however many CCGs there still are, because I lose count, about 160-ish, I think, Kate, the last count, then the fee is minuscule compared to the fee for the audit for the CCG itself. So I'm not going to say any more than that, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on either VFM, the audit reports, letter of representation, or the independent section of the report.
Thanks very much, Cameron. Colleagues, questions around those items for Cameron? Can I just check, it may be for you, Cameron, or it may be for another member of the team, given the VFM changes this year, normally the VFM statement would sort of be a sort of integral part of the accounts and the report and the auditor's response within those. Is that something that needs to be appended at a later date to those documents, or is that something that is now going to stand alone as a separate report that we produce? Does anybody know the answer to that?
The answer, like everything in life, Chair, is somewhere in between the two. So the audit report that we'll issue that gets signed and put into the annual report and accounts will refer to VFM. And while it'll say we've not fully completed the work on VFM, we've not identified any significant weaknesses. And we only need to report if there's a significant weakness. If there aren't, it's reported by exception. So it will clearly say that. And separately, we will be producing a separate standalone document this year, because the code requires us to do so. That will contain a more detailed commentary on the CCG's arrangements. That will be issued as a separate report, and I understand the CCG has to publish that on its website, as well as the annual report and accounts, because it is designed to be a public document of interest to members of the public, or indeed anybody else that wants to read it. The whole point of the change in the code, to a very large extent, was to try and make auditors
produce something a bit more useful for other stakeholders, other than just a qualified, unqualified. So more of a rounded, balanced commentary on arrangements, including sort of pros and cons where appropriate, including recommendations where appropriate to make that. It's unusual for auditors to make, in the past anyway, it's been unusual for external auditors to make recommendations in the public sector. This is designed to be a bit more transparent and flush some of the things out that less than good practice. And if you want to read a few things that are less than good practice in the public sector, it'd definitely be worthwhile reading the City of York Public Interest Report, the Croydon Council Public Interest Report, or the Nottingham Council Public Interest Report, all which highlight significant concerns around about the governance of senior officer pay or running local authority companies in the public sector. So not relevant to CCG, but quite much more interesting read than quite a lot of what you get from external audit. And I can say that because I'm your external auditor.
Thanks, Cameron. That's been clear. I'm assuming that you'll be working with our governance team on the timings of these documents, and that we'll be working them into our cycle of business for the governing body for the coming.
We will be, because we will need support from Kate and others within the team, just to make sure that the tone in particular, Chair, I think is right.
Yeah, I'm sure the team will, as usual, be working with you on that, and we'll be receiving the final document at governing body before it's published on the website and so on. I'm sure people will be interested to read it when it comes through. Any other questions or comments from others around the virtual table for Cameron? Nope. Well, it just remains for me then to echo Kate's thanks to Cameron and the team for the way in which they've worked together with the team to produce the audit. We will, as usual, note the report and recommend its approval within part of our annual report and accounts. So thanks once again, Cameron. Always good to get an unqualified audit opinion. We do like that. I'm aware that not all CCGs get them every time, as I think we have done for
forever, Chair.
Forever, yeah.
And it's not for the want of trying on our part.
Don't try too hard. You should try hard. In fact, you should try very hard to find problems, because if they are there, we want to know about them. We want to fix them. That's the whole point of the work that you do. So thanks again for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. We'll move on to the final agenda item, and that's John's approval of the annual report and financial statements. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Colleagues will be aware that the audit committee is comprised of lay members, in this case Pat, Paul and myself, to scrutinise the actions of the executive. We've done that throughout the year and looked at a number of issues. That process in itself supports the annual accounts and report. I said earlier in the meeting that at our last audit committee meeting we had considerable time to go through a number of issues relating to the annual report and accounts. We hear from internal audit and external audit throughout the year, and that's been summarised today by Jill and Cameron, and noting Cameron's a few pieces that have been left. We recognised in that process that there's experienced teams within the CCG, NEX, and our auditors, both internal and external, are very professional. We've reviewed other assurances from service auditor reports, from third-party business providers, and taken what assurance we can from them. And after following all that process, we did approve the draft accounts on behalf of the governing body at our last meeting and gave delegated authority to Kate and colleagues to make any changes. We've heard today there's been no changes. There's a few bits of work that are outstanding. So on behalf of the audit committee, I'd recommend acceptance of the annual report and accounts.
Thank you, John. I'm sure that the governing body will act on that recommendation and accept this recommendation and go forward and accept the accounts as suggested. So I think that brings this part of the annual cycle of our business to a close. Thanks everybody for joining us, for your contributions. Members of the governing body and auditors as well for your contributions to the process. Our next meeting will be at the end of July for the normal governing body meeting, and we may well see members of the public there, and I'm sure we'll all be looking forward to having enjoyed some good weather between now and then. You never know. Thanks everybody. Bye bye now.